The Blue Devils don't lose at Cameron Indoor all that often, but is Arizona's win an issue for Duke, or is it just a sign that Tommy Lloyd's team is the real deal?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is up, folks? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Happy Monday. Happy first full week of the college basketball season in the books. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Shade over there. And today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Isaac, we got a jam-packed show today. We got a tremendous Friday night game between Arizona and Duke. We're going to talk all about what that game means for Arizona, what that game means for Duke. We're going to talk a little bit about the Big Ten and some of the early season struggles we have seen from some of the teams in that conference. We're going to close us out with a six-pack of other updates around college basketball. Fantastic stuff. Before we get into any of that, Isaac has undertaken a very difficult job this year of continuing to count down all of the undefeated teams. As we are recording this right now on Sunday, there are 135 teams that have yet to lose this season. By the time you're listening to this, there will be 133, maybe 132. We're recording before the end of the St. Mary's Weber State game, before the start of the Washington, Nevada game. And if Montana can defeat UC Davis, potentially down to 132, but
32-20 right now, Andy. The Grizzlies are doing work.
Grizzlies are doing it right now. Isaac, what an incredible week. And I really want to start with Friday, because we could spend the entire show talking just about Friday's game. And part of that is because of the tremendous amount of fantastic games we saw on Friday, but it's also because, frankly, there weren't a lot of great games on Saturday or Sunday, or really.
We spread it out, Andy.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and I get why we don't. I know we've litigated this before on here. They're competing with college football, they're competing with the NFL on Sunday. But man, like if Friday was the one day you couldn't watch, you didn't get to see anything. You didn't get to see anything, and that is a huge bummer in college basketball. It's something that's going to be alleviated very soon as we get into the MTEs and the really exciting part. I mean, we got Kansas, Kentucky in a couple of days. We're going to be just fine, but a lot of the heavy lifting for this first week of college basketball was on Friday, and really a lot of the heavy lifting was a tremendous back and forth, constant, just incredible affair between Tommy Lloyd and the Arizona Wildcats and Jon Scheyer and the Duke Blue Devils at Cameron Indoor. We love true home games this early in the season. I don't know how you can watch college basketball and not be more excited when you're seeing the Cameron Crazies doing what they do. That was a tremendous game. And Isaac, there's a lot to talk about on the Duke side of things here. Some depth concerns, their ability to handle some big pressure in the front court, things like that. But I want to start with Arizona because, frankly, my big takeaway from this game is that it says a lot more about where Tommy Lloyd's Wildcats are right now, this early in the season, than it does about Duke. Does that sound fair to you?
It 100% does, Andy. Like, this is, to me, in no way an indictment on Duke. This is just a high-level basketball game where if these two teams played 10 times, they split it down the middle, probably. Mm-hmm. I mean, these are two teams that as I watch them, this might as well have been the Saturday of the Final Four, right? Like, yeah. I could very easily see that happening. And so,
do you remember my prediction for the national championship was this matchup, Duke versus Arizona? I'd be quite happy if this is what ends up happening this year.
Win. And so, Andy, for me, I don't devalue Duke. I did bump them down a little bit in my poll, and we'll get to that on tomorrow's show. Mm-hmm. But for me, what it just says is I got to slingshot Arizona up because good grief. And it's also two quick things about the matchup itself.
Right.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you, John. More of this, everyone. Secondly, we see the example of why we talk about like this cannot hurt you, two high-level teams playing, because for Duke, it's not like losing to a team that's going to now be in the top 5 is not going to ding you. Mm-hmm. But for Arizona, the reward from it is so great. So if both teams can agree, hey, like this isn't going to hurt either of us, but it's going to massively help one of us get an out of conference quad one, that's great. So there's that side of it and why we talk about having these matchups.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're Duke, like what Duke learned in this game, Kyle Filipowski, phenomenal game, 25 points. He looked incredible. Jeremy Roach had 17 points. Nobody else in double figures.
Flip can hit threes now, dude.
Yeah.
What?
No, he looked fantastic. But I think the depth concerns are not something that you necessarily see if you're playing Gardner Webb. Sorry to throw out a random team there, NJIT or whomever. Like, you see that when you play a team like Arizona and you realize, these guys didn't step up, but your freshmen have now been at camp. They've played a marquee team at Cameron. Like, they don't have to do that for the first time once the conference play starts. They already have it in the bag. And meanwhile, if you're Arizona, I mean, all 5 of their starters, Isaac, were between 11 and 14 points. That is incredible. I mean, talk about balance for a team like that. And the Caleb Love experiment is the most interesting story about Arizona right now. And what I loved about this game, and what I think this game really told us about Arizona, is they don't need Caleb Love. Like, Caleb Love can have Caleb Love performances, and it's not going to bury them. Because, frankly, that's what happened. Caleb Love was the worst starter for Arizona in this game statistically. He had 11 points, which is the fewest. He had 6 turnovers. He shot 3 of 10 from the field. He shot 1 of 5 from deep. He didn't.
Well, and that one was the bank in 3 before halftime.
I didn't realize that right as I said. I was like, oh, yeah, that one was that buzzer beater, too. Not a great game from Caleb Love, yet it didn't sink Arizona at all. And part of that is because Kylan Boswell is just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he looked incredible in this game. 12 points, 8 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals for him. And I think, you look at North Carolina last year and the mix between RJ Davis and Caleb Love, and Arizona or North Carolina could occasionally withstand bad performances from Caleb Love, but not often. And Arizona proved that they have the bandwidth, the ability to stomach poor Caleb Love performances against top 5 caliber teams and still win. That is, I mean, going into week 2, knowing that is incredible for Arizona.
Well, and it's funny because you do still get the Caleb Love moment of him going 4 of 4 from the free throw line down the stretch.
Yeah, exactly.
Did Pella Larson get the tip on that last Duke
inbound pass? I think so. I think it was Larson, yeah.
But he tipped it to Love, gave it up for the dunk at the buzzer. And so it's like, it's so hilarious because he has an inefficient game, a la Kirk Kriisa before him in previous years at Arizona, but still winds up with 3 of the most memorable moments of the game because of those 2 trips to the line and that assist at the end of the game. It's Caleb Love in a nutshell.
Yep, 100%. And I think with Duke, like, there is a depth concern. I don't think it's a huge concern, mostly because I think that these freshmen are going to just continue to get better and better and better as the season goes on. TJ Power didn't play in this game. And I think, like, Sean Stewart didn't play much. And I think you're going to see more from Duke's depth as the year goes on. And certainly a lot of high caliber programs don't play. They shorten their rotation against really good teams. That's commonplace. So
as will happen on Tuesday against Michigan State.
Exactly. It's just part of the deal, I think. But I think for Duke, like, they struggled a little bit with Oumar Ballot's size. He had 13 points, 5 boards.
A lot of it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Ballot just misses bunnies all the time. Like, he should have had 25 in this game, dude.
He probably should have. Yeah. You're right. But I think Duke learns more from this game than they would have learned against another opponent, even though that probably would have led to a victory. And I think at the end of the day, that's good for Duke. It's obviously good for Arizona to go get a road game at one of the toughest places in the entire country to play. It's good for the fans in the arena. It's good for us watching the game on TV. I mean, that's the rare win-win-win-win right there. And I think this was an incredible showcase of what college basketball can be. And like you said, more of this, please. This was incredibly fun, and I'm glad we got a chance to see it, but I wish we got to see more games like this.
Yeah, it's Shire's first home loss for Duke, and it is, I mean, he has stated it's going to be a difference from Coach K, who would not go on the road in non-con unless he was forced to. Coach Shire wants to make these home-and-home series with other elite programs a thing going forward. And so, Andy, I absolutely love it. With Duke, I think they're going to struggle when they face bigs like this. Like, I think about a dude like DJ Burns from NC State or Armando Bacot. How are they going to match up when they don't have Derek Lively going at it? That, I think that if Duke has a fatal flaw that we are seeing early in the year that could prove to be a fatal flaw in March and April, that's probably it. Well, folks, not only is maybe Duke going to be in trouble in the interior this season, the Big Ten, Andy, a lot of people talking about how good the Big Ten is going to be this year. Well, the Big Ten is actually the Big 14. It is about to be the Big 18. But is it also the Big Trouble? We're going to talk about that and try to answer it in just a second. right after I tell you that this episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by our good friends at Game Time. College basketball season is here, and you're going to need last-minute tickets to some incredible sporting action. Like we just talked about Duke, Michigan State, and Kansas, Kentucky. Tomorrow night, Champions Classic. You want to go? Check out Game Time. I guarantee you they got the seats you need. I know they're going to have them at a good price, and I know that I'm going to be able to see what the view looks like from my seat. So I know if I can get a great look at Hunter Dickinson as he's just trying to do work on the Kentucky lack of big men. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for any event you're looking for. Basketball, football, music, comedy, you name it, they got it. In addition to the view from your seat, I also love their low price guarantee. I love their event cancellation protection. That makes me feel comfortable to go ahead and buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download their app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price. Andy Patton, it's guaranteed. All right, let's talk about the Big Ten. Literally, as we started recording, we watched Indiana polish off Army there in Assembly Hall. But they shouldn't have had to. Andy, going against an Army team, I can't even. What is happening in Bloomington, Indiana? But it ain't just there, Andy. There seems to be some sort of going on with the Big Ten following the conclusion of that game. As a conference, they're now 24-6. Some good losses, against high-level teams, but also some head scratchers. Andy, what are you seeing right now from the Big Ten?
Isaac, first of all, I would love to talk about what I'm seeing in the Big Ten, but I also really want to tell you right now that Weber State is up 5 with 2 minutes left against St. Mary's, so we're going to keep a close eye on that game as it's going on. In regards to the Big Ten, Maryland they haven't looked good. They played Davidson and UAB, lost to both of them. Clemson played both those teams as well, and they won. They beat both of them, but they were very close games. Now, Davidson and UAB, this is not, these are pretty solid mid-major teams, and I think that's worth acknowledging. But at the same time, Maryland was a team that had top 5 aspirations in the Big Ten, that had aspirations to potentially be ranked. I think there were certainly a few places that considered them, at least in the receiving votes category, as a potentially ranked team, and they're losing to Davidson and UAB, just teams, again, not bad teams, but teams you can't lose to if you want to be in that top 25, if you want to, be representing your conference well. Then you have Michigan State, of course, losing to James Madison. That was the big story of week 1, but Michigan State through their first 2 games is shooting 6.5% from 3, 6.5%. That is the lowest 3-point percentage we have seen through a team's first 2 games in like 15 years. This team has some serious issues. They're going to be fine. I think Thomas is going to figure it out. I don't think this team is going to be like woefully inept at shooting the ball all year long, but it is not an area of strength. And then you have Rutgers. They lose to Princeton. Like, there's just a lot of teams falling in games they shouldn't be falling in. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and denigrate Ohio State for losing to Texas A&M or Wisconsin for losing to Virginia because, Tennessee. I was like, Virginia's not right. To Tennessee.
That was Florida.
Yes, right. So those are okay losses for Ohio State and Wisconsin in a vacuum, but they were at home. They were at home for both of those games. Like, you probably need one of those to help your conference out a little bit. So to me, the Big Ten always has this reputation of, they're going to beat each other up in conference play, and they're going to struggle in the tournament because of that. But like, they're struggling before we even get to conference play. And I think some of these teams are going to turn it around. But with Indiana looking questionable, Maryland looking questionable, this is a conference that frankly, outside of Purdue and if some surprising performances from teams like Michigan, who have looked very good, they just don't look that great right now.
Yeah. How about Michigan, by the way? I mean, we were poo-pooing them preseason, and they've moved up to 35th at Ken Palm already. Where did they start? At 45th. So they moved up 10 at Ken Palm. Illinois has done fine. It's funny.
Iowa's been fine.
Yep. Iowa's been fine. Northwestern has been fine. There's some of that, but Andy, if we take away Michigan State's loss to James Madison, you think we feel the same way right now? Are we feeling this because there's this one massive big ticket loss?
I think probably, yeah, because I don't think we would be. I don't think that Ohio State's loss or Wisconsin's loss are going to even really register on the radar all that badly. I think the conversation, if Michigan hadn't lost to James Madison, I think the conversation would be, wow, Maryland's bad. Like, I really think that is kind of what would drive down that conversation. And I think we might have a separate conversation about Indiana as well. But again, Indiana is 2-0. They won those games against Florida Gulf Coast and against Army. They did not look good, and I think they have some issues. Their guard play has been inconsistent. Mackenzie Mbako has done virtually nothing in their first two games. Khalil Ware has looked awesome, which is huge for them. Him and Malik Renault were that front court that we were expecting big things from it, and we're getting it. It's just the rest of the team's not doing anything. But I do think the Michigan State loss is really dragging down our perception of the Big Ten, and I think there's also just an element of the Big Ten has had 25 years worth of struggles in the NCAA tournament, so people really, really want to point that out. And I mean, Purdue obviously had the biggest, most notable loss last year. They have been completely fine in their first two games this season, but I do think that there is an element of Michigan State kind of dragging it down, but it's not just them that hasn't performed well this season.
And Andy, when we start to look at the conferences as a whole, I mean, I think this is part of the conversation because part of it is like the Big Ten as a conference is third at KenPom right now behind the Big 12 and the SEC, as we expected, right? Mm-hmm. But what's interesting to me is as we start to look at the dichotomy of it, it's like the Power 6 conferences are kind of divided up into three tiers right now. For those who aren't familiar, KenPom has the same like adjusted efficiency margins for the conferences that he does for the teams, and that's how he ranks them. And, you know, we should acknowledge that at this point of the season, there's previous data that is in on this and part of it. But that said, the Big 12 leads with a plus 17, SEC plus 16. There's a demarcation line there. That's your tier 1. Tier 2, Big 10 at plus 14.8, Big East at 14.3, and Pac-12 at 13.4. And then, Andy, third tier of the Power 6 conferences down by itself is the ACC, the only other double-digit conference, but they're only at plus 10.77. So a much bigger gap from the ACC up to tier 2 than from the Big 10 up to tier 1. So, you know, obviously, if we were looking at this Power 6 as a whole, we would say OACC, and we're going to talk about more ACC teams here in just a little bit, Mr. Patton. But we're talking about relative to expectation. I would have said preseason that I expect the Big Ten as a conference to not necessarily be in tier 1 with the Big 12 and the SEC, but at least be closer to that and not have as big a gap. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, you know, we know that there's bottom feeders in the ACC, and those teams have performed as we expected. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, but like there are bad teams in the ACC and they're playing like bad teams, but there are teams in the Big Ten. I mean, again, Maryland and Indiana, I know Indiana is one, but like those are teams that are expected to do a lot better. Michigan State is probably the biggest culprit in terms of like a team expected to be a top 5 team, and they're losing to teams that they should not be losing to, with all due respect, James Madison. And so I think you're seeing those expectations. I mean, you look at the Pac-12 and it's like they only have 2 losses as we're recording this right now. We'll see what happens with Washington and Nevada, but like Cal lost to Pacific, and that's not a good loss for Cal, but Cal is bad. Arizona State lost to Mississippi State. That's a fine loss. Arizona State is probably
even without Tulu Smith, they're a good team.
Yeah.
All right, by the way, Andy, really quick.
Yeah.
St. Mary's has their last possession. A 3-tie.
30 seconds left.
Rebound. Miss. Weber State gets the rebound. Ball game.
This thing's probably over. Wow.
Gale,
we're changing our top 25s.
Yeah, we need to update that. Andy, this game is in Moraga. Oh, no. 2.9 seconds on the clock. They got a foul. So Weber State's going to shoot a couple free throws before it's technically over. But they are up 3 going to the free throw line. I believe it's double bonus. So we'll keep talking about it and looking at it. Wow. Andy, if this happens, what does this mean for the West Coast Conference?
Well, it certainly means that Gonzaga is probably going to be back on top in terms of the rankings, in terms of the perception. Gonzaga's only played one game, of course, against Yale on Friday. They beat them by 15 points. Gonzaga also found out they're not going to have Steel Venters for the rest of the season. For the entire season, he never even got a chance to suit up for them. So their depth is in in a bad spot right now. They were playing 3 big lineups. They were playing guys they weren't expecting to be playing in game 1, but they went out and got a 15-point victory against a team that would probably finish 3rd in the WCC in Yale. So I think Gonzaga's in a good spot. And frankly, St. Mary's, they're susceptible to these kind of games because of the pace that they play at. I mean, they're
kind of think Virginia. If you're not familiar with St. Mary's, think Virginia. That'll help.
They play a Virginia style, and Weber State they're holding them to under 65 points, which isn't bad at all. But they only have, as we're recording right now, 57. That's the problem when you play such a low possession game, and they really struggled in the second half. They looked like they had this thing in the bag for most of the first half, but you miss some shots, the efficiency drops, and I've said this about Gonzaga and St. Mary's in the past, like. Both teams are capable of beating just about anybody, but St. Mary's is more susceptible to losses to bad teams than Gonzaga. It's very rare for Gonzaga to lose to teams worse than them. They do. They lost to LMU last year in Spokane for the first time since 1991. So it happens, but because Gonzaga plays at that frenetic pace, because they get out in transition, they tend to be able to quickly go on 10-0, 12-0, 16-0 runs and bury teams. St. Mary's doesn't do that. And if they have an inefficient night, they can lose to a team like Weber State, which is what we're watching right now. This is a tough blow for the Gales. They're probably going to be out of the top 25. And
I mean, they're 23rd in the top 25 right now. They're not. I think you and I both have them like in the teens, but AP voters all over the nation right now are scrambling to change. Their vote, so we'll keep our eyes on that one.
Well, Isaac, we got our first 6-pack of the season. For those of you who are new to the show, 6-packs are the way we end our Monday shows. We talk about 6 different games, events, things going on around the league that we weren't able to cover in the first part of the show. Typically, that's where something like St. Mary's losing to Weber State would go, but we're going to, of course, talk about a couple other games, including a big win for BYU, big win for Virginia, all that coming up after a word from today's sponsor, Jace Medical. And folks, for those of you who are longtime listeners of the show, we spend a lot of time chatting together, you and I, Isaac and I, and you all. We get fired up together about the big wins, the big games, the big losses, who's starting for certain teams, all that stuff. And I'm really thankful for the connection that we have. And today I want our chat to be a little bit more personal. Whether you're out on an extended travel, whether you're bracing for a major weather event, or just limited by yet another supply chain shortage, you are covered. Thanks to our partners at Jace Medical, life-saving antibiotics and a long list of daily medications can be ordered in a 1-year supply. Even ED generics for Cialis and Viagra can be filled. So go online right now at jacemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about their experience with Jace. Quote, I am so thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half in order to have it. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year's supply. I also ordered an antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than local pharmacies. I highly recommend this for everyone. So folks, if you or someone you love would like to get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily medicine, go to jacemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase. All right, Isaac, 6-pack, first one of the year. And we've closed out the final few games of the first week with a bang here with Weber State defeating St. Mary's, a pretty shocking result here. And we, like I said, we would have had that in here, but of course we just found out live that it's happening. But we're
which is better. It's awesome this way.
Always fun to be able to do it this way. The team that I'm going to talk about first, though, is a former foe of St. Mary's in the WCC, and that is BYU. BYU home game against San Diego State, the number 17 ranked Aztecs at the time, and BYU secures themselves a 74-65 victory. It is hard to win at the Marriott Center. Brian Dutcher is San Diego State is 4-30 playing road games at the Marriott Center, but yet Brian Dutcher said, we're going anyway. We're going to go play them out there, and they leave with a loss there, a tough loss for San Diego State, a really nice win for BYU, who's going to play a lot of really good teams in the Marriott Center this year in the Big 12. They're off to a good start doing so.
Andy, as I get into the second part of the 6-pack, I just realized why St. Mary didn't win their game. Aiden Mahaney scored to give the Gales 49 points with 12 minutes and 6 seconds left.
Mm-hmm. Hasn't scored.
Wessels made a layup with 5:18 left to give him 51. So that's like, 7 minutes of game time without scoring? That'll do it. Okay.
That'll do it.
On to the second part of our 6-pack tonight. I just lost my notes as I was getting back and forth to the St. Mary stuff. Okay, here we go, folks. This is podcasting in real time. You're here for it. We unfortunately from time to time have to dump on Louisville because unfortunately for the second year in a row, it appears that they are going to be absolutely terrible. They escaped with a win over UMBC on opening night and then then lost to UT Chattanooga on Friday. Hey, Andy, they're probably going to win Wednesday. They got Coppin State, who's 360th in the country at Ken Palm. Good grief if they don't. That's going to be bad. But here's the deal. The Cardinals have competition for the worst Power 6 team in the country this year. So keep your eyes on DePaul, who is 0-2 right now with losses to Purdue Fort Wayne and Long Beach State, Georgetown. Also holding down the cellar in the Big East, lost to Holy Cross this weekend. Notre Dame has the distinction of being the only Power 6 school outside the top 200 at Ken Palm. Yikes, they lost to Western Carolina. They beat Niagara, but Andy, come on. Obviously, Cal, as you talked about earlier, lost to Pacific. And so, Andy, the race is on for the worst Power 6 team in the country. I think this is probably something we should keep our eyes on all year long and make sure we always talk about it because misery loves company, right?
Something like that. Next up in our six-pack, Virginia defeats Florida, and we're going to stick with the WCC theme here, and former San Francisco head coach Todd Golden takes the loss there to Virginia, 73-70. That game was played in Charlotte. Blake Buchanan, really nice performance for Tony Bennett's squad. Comes off the bench, 18.7 boards for him. And you could see that Virginia's defense was just on point in this one. Florida shot just 40% from the field, only shot 25% from three. Walter Clayton, the big transfer addition for Florida, 9 points, 2 of 10 shooting with 5 turnovers. He struggled in Florida's first game as well. And man, Golden's really going to need Clayton to turn it around if this team's going to make any noise in the SEC.
That's 100% correct, Andy. Wow. James Madison. Obviously, we talked about that win over Michigan State earlier, but they followed it up by beating Kent State. And that might not sound like a big deal, but it was another true road game. Andy, we've been talking about those. They won a true road game at Kent State, double overtime thriller. James Madison was down with like under 5 seconds left in regulation, tied it, descended to overtime. Yeah. Kent State was down with like under 30 seconds left in the first overtime, tied it up. And so, I mean, just ridiculous stuff, Andy. So James Madison, these 2 road overtime victories to start the season. Great stuff. They won again on Sunday against Howard, but still they followed it up with a win. And Andy, they are favored in every one of their games per Ken Palm from now until January 6th. Bold hot take. Could James Madison be the last remaining undefeated team in Division I? We will wait and see, but love it, especially as their football team's having a great year as well. It's really neat.
Yeah, really, really good athletic year for James Madison right now. I couldn't figure out a way to connect this next one to the WCC, so apologies for those of you who are hoping to find a way to do so. But the SEC picked up a pair of really solid road victories, and we talked about these games from kind of the Big Ten perspective, and that was the Tennessee win over Wisconsin at Wisconsin, and of course Texas A&M with that win over Ohio State. But these are really good games for a conference that is really competing with the Big 12 at the Big East to be that best college basketball conference in the country. We've talked so much about Big 12 versus Big East and who's it going to be. But I mean, the SEC is right there. And Tennessee, I mean, 10-point victory over a very good Wisconsin team that will pick up votes probably in the AP top 25. They're very close to making our top 25. And Ohio State is a quality program as well. I think they're still kind of finding themselves, but for Texas A&M to go in there in their house and secure a victory, really nice wins for 2 really good teams in the SEC. You know, those 2 teams, Arkansas, Alabama, Kentucky, like, man, Auburn. I mean, it's going to be a really, really tough road in the SEC this year.
And he didn't start, but Zakai Ziegler played in this game, yeah, Andy Patton. I love to see it. All right, Andy, Memphis is making me think that FAU may not be the shoe-in that everyone thinks they are to win the AAC in their first year there. They blast Mizzou in Columbia, 70-55 on Friday night. Yet another true on-campus game. Way to go, Penny. Way to go, Coach Gates. Keep all of this going, folks. We absolutely love it. Memphis just does work with Javon Quinterly, 18 points, 8 boards, 5 assists, 3 steals. My friend, that is a stat line. Mizzou only scored 22 in the second half, shot 32.1% from the field. You got to do better than that, Andy. But better days are ahead for Mizzou. But I think this says a lot about Memphis and who they could be this year. It makes me really excited for the Memphis FAU matchups, which we haven't seen since the first round of the NCAA tournament last year when Penny was doing his very best Bobby Knight, rest in peace, impression. Folks, that's it for today's episode of Locked On College Basketball. We thank you so much for joining us on a Monday. Come join our Discord where we have more ridiculous conversations like these. It's such a blast. The link is in the show notes. Please make sure to subscribe on video and audio. Smash the like button if you're watching so we know you're here. And we'd love to hear your comments on this first week of games. Coming up tomorrow on the show, Andy and I are both back. We'll be reviewing our top 25 as well as the AP top 25, as well as some other content. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. And until tomorrow, peace.